How's everybody doing? Good? Great. Well, just like you said, my name is Barbara Finnin. I'm the director of City Slicker Farms. And these are timed. Oh no. Oh goodness. We're going to have some fun together with this slide. So, City Slicker Farms, we started back in 2001. And it was a bunch of folks living in the community who asked the question, where are we getting healthy food? Where can we in our community? And in West Oakland, that's really difficult. And it's still difficult. It's been difficult for a long time now. Where do you get food? Your corner stores and liquor stores. Those are the things that are around. And what are they selling there? We know it's at a corner store and liquor store. We got liquor, we got tobacco, we got calorically rich food, we got Fritos, we got nutriently dense. I mean, we don't have nutriently dense food. So what can we do? Well, City Slicker Farms said, going back, we can address these problems and by thinking about the assets that exist in our community. So in our community in West Oakland, there are lots of things like access to vacant plots of land. We also have a lot of individuals who have gardening and farming experience. So why don't we come together as a community and start building our own food system to become self-reliant? So basically what we're doing, and you can see through our mission, is we're partnering with West Oakland residents to grow their own food in some. And why are we doing this work? I answered some of that. And then to say a little bit more, does anybody know where West Oakland is? All right, great. Come on over if you haven't been. West Oakland, just across the bay, it's the first BART stop. And we're surrounded by freeways. We got the Port of Oakland. We got a lot of issues around pollution. It's also a very mixed residential and industrial center. There are a lot of industries there creating jobs. Unfortunately, a lot of them are gone. And they have a lot of pollution that they're emitting into the community. So we have that happening. We have poverty. Statistics run between 20 to 34% of our West Oakland residents are living below the poverty level. And we have rampant chronic health problems. And I talked about the pollution, I talked about poverty, and I talked about food access. Where are people getting their food? If you aren't able to get fresh, healthy food to nourish your body and increase your immune system, how are you going to deal with all this pollution? And how are you going to deal with all these other problems? And then there's just basic limited access to transportation. For a lot of people to get to a grocery store, it's an hour-and-a-half bus ride. Because buses don't go straight places where you need them to go, and it takes a long time to get to places that you can afford. And a lot of people we work with go once a month to Costco because they can get in a car with other people. That one person they know has a car. But are you going to get produce? You're going to get produce for a little bit, but that's not going to sustain you for a month. So where are you getting your food? Then, of course, we got to talk about our history of structural inequities. West Oakland is primarily a low-income community of color, like a lot of what you see in our flatlands in the East Bay. And we have to talk about, there are some structural inequities that have happened. I'm talking things around, class and race, where we have things like redlining. So it's literally, I'm sure a lot of you know about redlining, where policymakers are looking at a map and putting a red line around places where you de-invest. So that was happening with West Oakland. So our strategies, and I'm going back, are thinking about our philosophy and our strategies, thinking about what can we do immediately. We live in California. We can start growing food immediately. That's awesome, and we can do it all year round. And then we can also think about self-reliance. If we're growing our own food for our community and ourselves, we can rely on ourselves. And when I say growing our food, I just want to be really specific. I'm talking about produce. I think it's really important. We're not talking about field crops. We want to be real realistic about what we're talking about. We're not talking about rice and corn and wheat and things like that. We're talking about produce. So how do we rely on our own selves and our community to grow its own food? And then thinking about how do we change the definition of a local food system that can exist in our yard and in our neighborhood. And then also lifting up the knowledge and skills and ability in our community. I think it's really important to know your community, know the skills that exist there. A lot of our elders, primarily a lot of our African American elders, came from the South, where they're farming and gardening. When we started our programs, learned a lot from folks that were farming and gardening in the South. So I want to talk about 3 of our core programs. And the first one is our Community Market Farms program. And thank you there's so many definitions and so many ways to do urban agriculture. And the Community Market Farm Program is basically taking plots of land and growing food intensively, and then that food is then being distributed at a farm stand. So the idea is not everybody's gonna wanna grow their own food or has the land to do it. So how can we aggregate the land that exists in our community to grow as much food as possible for the entire community? Or as much as we can, as you said. And the idea, again, of a community market farm, you're also having a farm stand that exists on the site, so people can also see how you're growing. I think it's really important for people to see what your basic farming techniques are. And to go over that a little bit, we do bio-intensive farming. We don't have the luxury of lots of land. Currently, our full acreage with our many different plots is just over an acre. And this does not include the new land, which I'll talk about in a second. So we don't have a lot of land, and we can't leave it fallow, so we have to use techniques like bio-intensive to constantly be growing food in there. And a large part of bio-intensive is having compost operations, and know your permitting with composting, by the way. I won't get into that now, but if you have questions. In order to put a lot of compost into your garden, you need to generate a lot of compost, which means you need a lot of food scraps, which are things that we get from actually local restaurants, or local businesses that are giving food scraps. And we also get a lot from horses in the hills of Oakland. So we're just thinking about what are our community assets to create this compost that's needed, and also how do we a little bit more self-contained when we think about nonprofits. We have low budgets, so how can we grow our own seedlings for our not only our community and our community market farms, our backyard garden program. So we have a greenhouse in West Oakland, and that is actually a collaboration with a school there that just happened to have a greenhouse that they weren't using. So just kind of give you some numbers. Our benefits. So I talked about a little over an acre. We're growing 9,600 pounds of food. And basically that's going to about 725 residents. This number changes every year, in all honesty. It goes from about 700 to about 1,500 people. And that's what we can produce with that amount of land. And we also, through our greenhouse, which is a little less than half of this room, we're producing over 26,000 seedlings. And actually last year we produced 32,000. So it's kind of interesting to think about how many plants you can grow in small spaces, and thinking about economy, how can we make money off of that? And then also we're growing or producing about 11 tons of compost, mainly from, again, community food scraps and folks that own horses in the hills. But there's constraints that we need to be thinking about, and especially for grassroots organizations like ourselves or people just starting, access to land in the Bay Area it's so hard. And I'm going to talk about land insecurity in a second, but it's really difficult to get access to land if it's publicly owned, privately owned, and access to water is a really big deal. We have a couple of plots that don't have access to water. We have to ask our neighbors for it, which can be difficult because it costs between $20,000 and $40,000 to get hooked up to your municipal water system. I don't know why it costs that much, but it does. And then also things you need to think about in the city is soil contamination. The biggest thing that we see, because right now all of our plots are on residentially zoned areas, is that lead is a big deal, mainly because of lead paint. All right, so now I'm going to talk about our backyard garden program. And that program actually started in 2005, so that started a little after we began. And it's the whole idea of how can we invest more in people to grow their own food. I want to step back with our community market farm program. We have drop-in volunteer hours, so anybody can help grow all of the food. It's throughout the week, so our community members, anybody that's outside, you all are invited to help us grow the food. And then our backyard garden program was to seek to answer that question of how do we support people to do this. And the nice thing about West Oakland is that a lot of these houses were built with yards that had kitchen gardens. So just to express, we're actually not doing anything brand new here. You know, urban agriculture has been part of cities for basically ever. It's just been the past few decades where we haven't seen it. When the value of land is, you can get more money for selling your land than you can for growing food. So that trend kept going, so we've lost a lot of land. But just to say, this is a newer phenomena that we see less urban agriculture in cities. So anyway, so we have a lot of folks that have yards, backside, front yards, and a lot of our affordable housing units also have yards associated with it. So what a great boon. So we partner with folks who apply to our program, And these are, again, people, low-income folks that really want to grow food to not only get it on the table, but have a place and a space to heal. A lot of people, when you talk to them, I'll talk about stress levels being very high. There's a lot of stress going on for a lot of people. It's a sense of pride. This is a place where you can hang out. And also, what we want to think about, we just don't go in and build a garden. It's about relationship building, and how do we support people to have this be something that goes into the future. They're doing it, their children are doing it, their grandchildren. So we partner all of our backyard applicants with a mentor who are with them for 2 years. So to help them come out, they come out on a quarterly basis, talk about any technical assistance that's needed, as well as bringing supplies. There's a lot of people, half of the residents in West Oakland do not own cars, so imagine trying to get a flat of plants or soil or things like that. So we're there to really bridge the barriers that a lot of people experience. And then we have add-on services. That's our inside speak for saying, you want to grow a bigger garden? After you've been with us for a while, we'd love to help you grow a bigger garden, because some people just farm their entire backyard. And also to note the community building piece. I don't know if any of you have experienced this who garden, but in the beginning when we started the Backyard Garden program, we barely had to do outreach because people were looking over at each other's fences and saying, hey, what are you doing? That's awesome. I want to do that too. My grandparents did that. I want to do that. So that's how we've gotten most of our backyard garden participants. All right, to go over some of the benefits is that we work with roughly 100 households per year. So it's about 600 people in total. And they're growing 24,000 pounds of food. Remember that other number I said, 9,600? They're growing 24,000 pounds of food. So I think it's really important is just with any of our strategies, again, how do we support people to do this? Because the more people that you can support to do this, the more food that you get. And also, again, those places of healing for a lot of people. That's where they go to just relax. And I talked a bit about the community building piece. 80% of our backyard gardeners barter. That's a technical term for just swapping. You got tomatoes, I got squash, let's swap. I think that's important because when we talk about economy, there's getting a job and getting money, and then there's also cost savings and also supporting your community. If you go into economics, thank you, they're the one and the same. Oh my God, 2 minutes. So I think it's really important to think about that because there was actually a policy to do that. You had to get a permit. If bartering is a technical term, meaning that you had to get a $2,800 permit from the city to do that. So there are rules in our books that we need to think about that are actually limiting some of our activities. And I'll get into animal husbandry in a second. Real quick, urban farming education program. We offer a lot of opportunities for people to get involved in learning urban agriculture. Everything from internships, volunteering, workshops, etc. I'm just going over that fast because I want to talk about what's possible. We did an Oakland audit of all the available land, and we have about 1,200 acres of public land that's not doing anything that could be used for urban agriculture, and you can look at that stat. And there's different ways to think about that. We have a partnership with the city of Oakland to rethink city parks. If you're in a city these days, your budget's getting slashed, so partnerships with the community and community groups is really smart. And there's also money out there for brownfields to clean them up and make them accessible for the community. And I'm going to talk about Proposition 84 in a second. So this is a community design process that went through by pro bono landscape architects. Thank you all for your pro bono work. Who looked at 2 triangular parks that were not being utilized by most of the residents around there. And we were actually asked to start a farm and park there. So this is, you can see some of our garden beds and some folks coming together. We did a 1.5-year community process for this, and then we did a community design, and then the community came together to build it. And then what you all might be interested in, because we have an RFP out, is we got a grant in the end of 2010 to buy land, so it's 1.5 acres in West Oakland, which is huge for the Bay Area, to buy land and build a farm and park. So Kevin, who's here, thanks Kevin, helped us with the design process. So we did a 3-month design process and then got this grant. So through the design process, what we heard was that people want food, they want places to recreate, they want places to come together, and they want places for their children to be able to play. So you can see some of the design charrette that was done and just kind of the ideas that came out of that. And this was an amazing opportunity to think about different pots of money to get urban agriculture into the community. And also to think about the unique opportunity about the structure that can be had for ownership of the land. And I won't go into that, but that's an interesting thing to think about. Who owns this land? City Slicker Farms does, but what if we leave? So those are things that we're thinking about. So there's things to think about if you're getting into these really exciting projects, is that every city is different with their policy. Do I have 0? And I have in this slide, I don't know if you guys have handouts, but there's a lot of great places to look to see how policy changes is happening. Like I said, it's really important to look what's on your books, because there's a lot of things that are potentially illegal, and which is crazy. And just to end on that, where it's happening right now in Oakland, which is exciting in a way, is that there's a lot of people trying to potentially get rid of animal husbandry in the city. So what we're doing as a community is coming together to say meat is actually a food group that we can't take away. We can't tell people that they can't eat meat. So if people are subsisting and trying to get food on the table, what are ways that we can make sure we're good neighbors, good to the animals, and feed our bellies? The end.